It's all yours, Olive.
Hey, everybody. Tonight we're debating the definition of atheism and its consequences, and we're starting right now. Without further ado, TJump will start things off for us, and Converse will go next.
All right, so we're debating the definition of atheism and its consequences. The way I define atheism is there is no reason to believe in the existence of a God. The classical philosophical definition is that there is no God. It's the positive claim there is no God. And my position is a neutral claim that does not hold the same burden of proof. I'm not claiming there is no God. I'm claiming there are no reasons to believe in a God. So the burden I hold is to show that the reasons don't hold up or that there are no reasons. I do not hold the burden to show God does not exist. So that's the difference between the two claims. And mine can actually be more generally interpreted as the position that everything starts off as imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. So if you assert something exists like a God, that thing is imaginary, as in it does not exist, anything other than something in our heads, until demonstrated otherwise. And in that case, it would actually be in line with the philosophical definition where it attempts to meet the burden of proof where God does not exist by saying that anything that is asserted without evidence doesn't exist until demonstrated otherwise. And that's essentially the general definition, and I'll just give the floor to my Converse contender.
Okay. So since he started off with the definition he accepts, he actually gave the definition that I accept for atheism. I'll just read it to you from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Atheism is typically defined in terms of theism. Theism, in turn, is best understood as the proposition something that is either true or false. It is often defined as the belief that God exists, but here belief means something believed. It refers to propositional content of belief, not to an attitude or psychological state of believing. This is why it makes sense to say that theism is true or false and to argue for or against theism. If, however, atheism is defined in terms of theism, and theism is a proposition that God exists, and not the psychological condition of believing that there is a God, then it follows that atheism is not the absence of a psychological condition of believing that God exists. The A in atheism must be understood as negation instead of absence, as not instead of without. Therefore, in philosophy, at least, atheism should be construed as the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly, the proposition that there are no gods. Now, I know that Tom mentioned that that is how philosophers use the term. But what I would point out starting off here is just that if we're going to have a philosophical conversation, we should start with the terms that the professional philosophers lay out. For example, in a debate that Tom had with I believe his name was Drew, he says, what is moral progress? And Tom says, moral progress is just the theory that we progressed past where our morals were in the past. And he said, what are we progressing toward? And he goes, no. It's just how philosophers define it in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So that is how it's defined. So that's it. You just disagree with them. And so what I would do is I would just put the shoe on the other foot and say, why should I accept what you're saying instead of what they're saying if we're going to have a philosophical conversation?
Well, in the context of atheism, since it's describing my position, I get to define it however I want. So when I say atheism is, and this is how I define it, I'm just saying this is the position and what I mean by atheism. Whether you accept it or not is irrelevant. If you don't accept it, you'll just be strawmanning my position. So the reason you should accept it is so that we can have an honest conversation where you actually represent my position. Whether or not you think it's correct or there's a better definition is just irrelevant because it's just a statement of my position.
Okay. So I actually wrote that down here, that because I've heard you say it before, that if you're not, if you are strawmanning my position, if you do not accept the definition that I give, the problem with that is why have a conversation? Because here's the problem. If I were to debate atheists and I were to say, I'm an atheist, and by that I mean, and then I were to give my definition, I don't believe there's any definition. I don't believe there's any evidence or reasons to believe in atheism. All I do is take the other side of that and just represent it to you before you start. Then you have to do what you're wanting me to do.
Correct. So you get to define your position however you want. You can name it Ghibli Wibbly if you want to, and just say it
Right.
is the position.
Okay.
Yeah, you can. You're right. I have to accept whatever definition you define as your position and however you define it.
Here's the problem with
If I
that.
don't do that,
Use
then that's misrepresenting your position.
Okay. Well, here's why I say that. Here's why I think the technical term that the philosophers use is used for a reason. Is because you say I'm an atheist, by which I mean there is no evidence or reason. You said this
Reason to
time
believe.
to believe in a God, and then I say, okay, well, I'm an atheist, which by that I mean there are no reasons to believe in atheism. Where do we get with that? Absolutely nowhere. Because you might even agree that there are no argument, like Pine Creek said that the other day, that there's no good arguments for atheism. He said there's no reasons for atheism. So I would say that that gets us absolutely nowhere. Now, if we started with the proposition God exists or the proposition that God does not exist, we could get somewhere because as the article, I believe it was written by Paul Draper, says, there are only two answers to this question, that there is or God, that God does exist, or the negation of that claim. All the other, claims are they're not direct answers to the question. In fact, he puts the definition has the added virtue of making atheism a direct answer to one of the most important metaphysical questions in philosophy of religion, namely, is there a God? There are only two possible direct answers to this: yes, which is theism, and no, which is atheism. Answers like I don't know, no one knows, I don't care, an affirmative answer has never been established, or the question is meaningless are not direct answers to this question. So I would just send it back to you.
Right, but my definition isn't the lack theist definition. My definition is the positive claim, there is no evidence. So the same thing can apply to that claim. Either there is evidence or there is not evidence. So it moves the conversation forward in the exact same way. It just focuses on the part that the atheists care about. The actual majority of atheists in today's society don't actually care about the question, does God exist? That's not the point. The point is to say, there is no reason to believe in a God. Is there any evidence? That's the question that matters. And so it still applies in the same sense, whereas you'd have to say, there is evidence and here is some, or you'd have to agree there is not evidence.
Okay.
And if you want to
So
take
then
the atheist position, you could just derail the conversation. You can do that, but it doesn't change our position at all. So it doesn't. I mean, the conversation can progress forward if you just say there is evidence or there isn't evidence.
You see, but here's the thing. I believe that is actually your methodology with this, not just you. So I'm not saying you're sinister. Actually, I actually really appreciate Tom, because I've asked many other people like Pine Creek to debate, and they're just like, no. Where Tom's like, what? Yeah, what day? So I really appreciate him on that. So I'm not saying like he has some type of, motive, but I'm saying the methodology. If I were to start all my conversations with, I'm an atheist, by which I mean, and I'm not talking in typical terms, I'm talking in a colloquial term. Here's the problem with that. There are no reasons to believe in God. Okay. If that is the definition of atheism, as philosophers have pointed out to you on your channel, then a fideist, a Christian fideist, is an atheist in that sense. Even they believe in God. They just don't think there's any good reason to believe, and they're fine with that. They say we don't have to justify it. So in that sense, they're Christian atheists, and that's why I say the term breaks down at some point.
Well, no, it doesn't break down at all. That's one of the classical mistakes Steve McRae thinks. He doesn't understand the difference between epistemic positions and ontological positions. You can be an epistemic atheist, which means you think there are no reasons to believe in a God, but be an ontological theist, which means there is a God. So you can have the position that there are no reasons, like in atheism, in the sense I'm using it, and still believe there is a God ontologically. So they would be epistemic atheists, but they would not be ontological atheists. There is no contradiction.
Okay, but see, I thought you might mention that because, as Paul Draper put in his article, we're identifying atheism with the metaphysical claim that there is no God. Now, if you want to say, well, no, it's an epistemic claim that, that there are no reasons to buy into it. Well, that's almost indistinguishable from agnosticism, because it's just saying that, hey, it may be true, but I just don't have any good reason to buy into it. Now, if you give me one, I will buy into it. But like I say, the shoe fits on the other foot. I could just run the exact parallel argument back to you about atheism. And that's why I think it breaks down again.
Well, again, no, it doesn't. It's not the same as agnosticism, as I explained in the beginning, because the atheist position is that things are always imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. So if you assert a God, we're not agnostic that there could be a God or there couldn't be a God. We're saying it's imaginary. It doesn't exist until you demonstrate it does. And so we've already met the burden of proof to say, nope, there is no God in the epistemic sense.
I disagree. I disagree because making the claim that there are no reasons isn't a positive claim to meet some burden of proof against the fact that there is a God. So, for example, I'll just tell
No,
you.
you're right. I apologize. You're totally right about that. The point that this definition of atheism uses is that everything is imaginary until demonstrated otherwise is like a presupposition, we call it. Or we've assumed this, we've met the burden of proof of this claim, that everything is imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. Which
Right,
means if you assert a God, then it is already in its imaginary category, and you would have to get it out of that category. It starts there.
Right. Well, I'm familiar with your distinction of these categories. This isn't something that philosophers get into because then you're getting out of the definition of atheism and you're getting into a category that you have made up to justify your beliefs in atheism. And let me just point out the reason why I say that is because you're saying that you have to distinguish between the two. And the problem with that is that's going to get us into idealism, Berkeleyan idealism, and other fields that are completely outside of this question that's going to pull us way down into the philosophy of whether you can actually justify something that's different, that's not imaginary, that's actually in reality as well. I know that you do believe that you can, and you believe you have a system for that. But I don't believe you do, and that all that's going to do is take us down that road into how do we justify that position.
That's the point. That's why I use that definition. It is the reason I use that definition is to get into those kinds of arguments because it is representative of my position. That's kind of the point.
Right, but don't you, but I like I said, I think that's part of your methodology is that you're using. So if I were to say you can't come up with anything to differentiate reality from imaginary, you would try and come up with reasons, but then I would have to buy into those reasons and say those reasons are reasonable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Where's the problem?
Okay. Do you want to go down that road and let's just hash it out? I mean, is that what we want to do? Because I'm willing to do that. I did want to well, we can get to the.
I don't want to get into the actual argument, but like if I take a position of a solipsist, a hard solipsist. So a hard solipsist thinks nothing exists except their mind. It's all an illusion.
Right.
That's their position. Now it doesn't matter how incoherent it is. Doesn't matter how silly it is. That's their position. And then you have to accept their position if you want to actively represent it, and then try to argue them out of it. They may or may not accept these arguments, but that's what you have to do to have an honest conversation. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm saying, this is my position. It's not like just a methodology. This is genuinely what I believe. This is what I actually hold to as a position. And I'm saying, if you want to say my position is incorrect, you have to first accept my definition and then attack that definition. If you change it to a different definition, you're just strawmanning my position, and you're not talking about what I'm talking about. So, I mean, it doesn't matter if you agree with the definition or not. If you want to actually engage with my position, you have to accept it simply for the purpose of the argument.
I agree with that sentiment. The only distinction I would make is that when people typically talk about atheism, they're in philosophical circles, they are not defining it the way you do. So if we're going to, basically what we're doing is we're conflating the term that you use as atheism with the term that was used by, the philosophers down through history. And we're going to say, well, you're going to take a softer position. Is that what you would call it? Because let me lay out why I think that people use this, and then you could tell me where I'm wrong. Like people like the American Atheist and Atheist Experience and people like that. I believe that they use it because they're pretty far on the left, and I believe that they see like LGBTQ plus 2 and the rest of them as taking small numbers of people, including as many as you can to make a bigger group. So if you're just saying, nope, we say God doesn't exist, then you're going to be a much smaller group. But if you're open to, well, we're not saying God doesn't exist, we're just saying we don't have any reason to believe in it, then you're allowing in agnostics, Christian fideists, and other people into that group that say, Yeah, I agree with that claim. And it makes your group bigger. What I'm so
let
I'm not
me pick up on that.
sure.
So the usage of this term atheism doesn't come from big groups or political organizations. They definitely
I know
picked it
that.
up later.
Sure.
And you're right, they use it to try and gain inclusivity, but they mostly use it as a contrary position to say theism bad. That's essentially what they mean by it.
Right.
But the original usage of these terms was in the weak atheist sense is because that's what the people who use them actually meant by them. Like there are philosophers who have used these terms. There are and there are scientists who have used these terms, and there are people like Barendel Bach is the earliest one I know of who did it, and it was in like the 1700s. I have no idea what his profession was, but he used it in this sense because that's what he meant by it. It wasn't like a political move to try and get the most people involved. It's just that's
Sure.
just what he meant by the position. It's what he believed, and so the origin of this term is just that's what the people believe when they say it. So
I believe
it doesn't make a difference if you agree with it or not. It's just that's what their position is.
So let me just give you a hypothetical because I'm trying to work this out for myself, and there's a lot of atheists and agnostics who agree with me on this. So let me just say this, and I'm not using that as a counter example against you, but rather I would just say help us to understand. Let's say that we were looking at a hypothesis, okay? What explains this? And we were to say, I were to say God. And you were to not say not God, or one guy says not God, okay? And then the other guy says, there's no reason to believe the God hypothesis. That doesn't negate the God hypothesis, obviously. That all that does is say, it doesn't even give an alternative hypothesis. It just says, I don't believe that one. It's like, well, what's your position? Like, what hypothesis are you giving? Oh, I'm just saying I'm not going to believe yours until you do this. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's not an answer to the question. The same way that Paul Draper put, right, in his article, that it's just not an answer to the question.
That's correct. It's not. It's just saying that your answer doesn't work. That's all it needs to say. Like you hold the burden of proof. If you have a positive claim to say there is a God, you have the burden of proof to demonstrate it. And if you can't demonstrate it, I can just say, nope, not that answer. It doesn't mean I don't need an alternative. I don't need to say that there's something else that did. I can just say that evidence is insufficient and be done. That is a coherent position.
Well, see, here's the thing though, is when you have a position on something, then you hold a burden of proof the same as a theist. So if a theist and an atheist in the philosophical sense were to have a conversation, they both hold an equal burden. Now, if you were to say, no, but I'm not saying that God doesn't exist. I'm just saying I don't believe what you're saying is the case because there's not the reasons there. And like I say, all I would do is just adopt atheism as a position instead and say, that's what I am. I just don't find any reason. It's not an answer to the question either way. If we were to both say, I don't find any reason to believe in theism, and I don't find any reason to believe in atheism, it wouldn't get us anywhere. So that's one of the main.
You're confusing the definitions here. So my position, like take the Big Bang or the cosmological argument. The universe began to exist. My position isn't that I know what caused the universe. My position is that God didn't do that. There's no evidence to show God did that. So I'm not saying I know what else did it. I'm not giving any alternatives. I'm just saying your evidence doesn't work. That is the argument. Like, I don't care what caused it. My position has no answer to that at all. It's not an interest to me. The only thing that interests me is that your arguments and evidence that propose a solution don't work. That is the claim. That is atheism in the modern social sense. It's just your claims that God did X are unsupported. That's all they care about. They don't care about what actually caused X. That's a different question. That's a question for the scientists, not a question for the atheists. The atheists are just saying, not God did that.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though. It's important that we use the terms of the academy if we're going to have an academic debate. No, because if we were to have a debate on atheism, and it's your definition of atheism that you've come up with, and we were to have this full out definitional debate, it would say nothing about the definition that philosophers use. It would just be that I'm refuting your personal position. Now, when we're right, and all that's going to do is just say, hey, that's just going to lead us to, Tom, I don't think that you have a way to distinguish the imaginary.
So my position is that there is no reason to believe in a God. So if you refute my position, then that proves there are reasons to believe in a God. So that's
And my position is there are no reasons to believe in atheism. If you refute my position, then that would lead to your position being correct.
No, because again, my position isn't a positive position. It's just the negation of theism. So if there's no reason to believe in atheism, and atheism is the position that there are no reasons to believe in a God, then there are no reasons to believe that there are no reasons to believe in God.
You see, all I'm doing is I'm using your same logic, but I'm putting the shoe on the other foot because it works the same way. It
doesn't. It definitively doesn't, because my definition of atheism isn't the positive claim there is no God. It's the positive claim there is no evidence. So
right, and I'm saying
atheist, what that means is that you're saying that there are no reasons to believe that there are no reasons in God.
No, because like you said, you get to define your own position. See, you were strawmanning my position there. You see, I get to say yes, because what you say in your opening to your debates, when a philosopher or someone comes on, you say, I'm an atheist, and by that I mean, and then you give your definition, to which they almost always respond, but that's not the definition. And then you go, yeah, but that's what I mean by it, and you don't want to strawman my position. So my position is that I'm an atheist. By that I mean that I don't believe there's any good evidence or reasons for atheism that is defined in the way that philosophers use it.
Okay, so you're saying that you believe there are no reasons to believe God does not exist?
No. I'm saying atheism, the belief
that God does not exist.
Yes, that belief. I don't think there are any good arguments or evidences or reasons to believe that that is true.
So you believe that there are no good reasons to believe the belief that God does not exist is true?
Right.
Okay. I can grant that. And we can have a conversation. Like, the fact that you define it that way doesn't cause any challenges at all.
No, but I'm saying that's all you're doing. Is you're saying that you just don't find there are any good reasons to believe that belief in God is true. It's the exact. I'm doing the inverse of what you said. And what I'm saying is, if there's a proposition P, okay, P, God exists, or not even God exists, just any proposition. What caused this? What teleos? What purpose? What is the fine tuning? All of these things. What is the best hypothesis? Well, I say that there's no good evidence for not believing in God. You say there's no good reasons to believe in God, and that doesn't actually give an answer. So what I'm saying is, at some point, we're going to have to give answers to these questions instead of just trying to obfuscate and provide and try to get around our burden of proof. Because that's the other thing is, atheists used, like let's say Albert Camus, say Nietzsche, say Sartre. These guys, they knew we're not just saying we don't buy into the Bible or things like this. We're saying, like, hey, there's going to be, like, if atheism is true, here are the consequences. Like, it's not, and then they came up with their reasons. And so they knew that they had a burden of proof on themselves to say, here's the what we would do. And what they would do is they would give arguments like, let's say, the argument from evil and things like that, to try and have a positive position and give an answer to the question, rather than just go.
But I don't care about any of their positions, because I'm defining my position, not their position. So why do you keep bringing up their positions?
Because it's exactly what I just said. You say there's no reason to believe in God for this hypothesis. I say there's no reason to believe in not God for this hypothesis. Okay, well, what's the answer?
There's no issue there. You can say that. So where's the problem?
I agree. The problem is, at some point, we have to actually give answers.
No. Again, my position isn't about giving answers to those questions. I don't know what caused the Big Bang. I'm not going to try and give an answer to that question. So if you keep trying to force me, straw manning my position to try and answer those, well, I'm not. My position doesn't answer that question. It doesn't try to. My position answers the question, does it indicate a God? So you keep trying to straw man me into using the stronger definition of atheism, which isn't my position.
No, I'm not strawmanning you at all, because I gave your definition and you accepted it. That's what a straw man is. And then I said that at some point you say this and I say that, they get us nowhere. So
You said that at some point we have to answer these questions. And by these questions, you mean like what caused the universe? Is there a God or is there not a God? Correct? That's these questions?
yes.
And I'm saying I don't even attempt to answer that question.
Okay.
That is not a part of my model. That is something completely separate. So no, I don't ever have to answer that question.
All right. So let me put it in a different way. Philosophers have to give answers to these questions. And you say that you're a philosopher. So I would say...
No, they only have to give answers to those questions if they try to answer those questions. Like there are philosophers of different kinds of fields, like philosophers of mathematics, that don't ever try to answer that question because it's not what they're working on. I am not working on that question. That is a different question. I am working on the question, is there evidence? That is the question I am answering.
Okay. So then this is what I'll point out is a lot of times when there's debates on between theist and atheist, there is an equivocation on these terms because people are speaking past each other. So you're saying, I'm not giving an answer. I'm just not buying into what you're saying because of the lack of reasoning. And I'm saying...
You're absolutely right. There are lots and lots of times where that happens, where they equivocate between the terms. That's why the first thing I say in every debate is, I am an atheist and here's what I mean by it. So you can no longer equivocate because I've just told you exactly what I mean by it. And so if you're equivocating at that point, you're just misrepresenting my position because I've already told you what it is.
But here's the thing is, that definition is integral to your model.
No, it's integral to my position. It literally represents my position.
Yeah, but also to your other positions, because to your other positions, you have a framework of beliefs, okay? And here's the thing is, like when a philosopher...
I'm not following. What do you mean?
Well, let me finish, and you maybe you'll follow. So when a philosopher comes on to your channel and they say, that's not the definition of atheism that we use in philosophy. You say, it doesn't matter, don't straw man put my position. I start with atheism, and by that I mean this, because if you didn't use that definition of atheism, it would alter your framework or your model, because now you have to acquire a burden of proof.
No. If I didn't use that definition, I would be strawmanning my own position. Like I could define atheism as the belief that there are 10 gods, and then I could use that definition, but it wouldn't be my position. The reason I use that definition...
It also wouldn't be a good definition of it. So
it doesn't matter. The definitions can't be good or bad. They're arbitrary. You can pick whatever definition you want. That's how language works.
Okay. Let me make this point. If it's true that atheism is... Let's take your position. If atheism is that there is no, I do not believe in your God because there are no reasons. So
no. It's not that. It's just saying I believe or there are no reasons to believe in a God.
Just one second,
I don't
guys.
believe in your God.
If we can move into now the effects of atheism, we're going to split this up into an hour. So that's a half hour. We got done with the first part. Now we get to the effects. Now, thank you.
Well, I mean, I think those are the same thing. We're talking about the effects is like the fact that there's equivocation. That's like one of the effects. So
here's one of the effects. Here's one of the effects is that's what I was about to get into is, as other philosophers have mentioned to you, having a definition like that of atheism, where it's that there are no good reasons to believe in a God, does not negate theism. So it's not. In fact, there are many Christians that would fall into that category, and as other atheists have, as other atheists have said, if they're a Christian atheist, then I'm not an atheist. And so, what I would point out is, I think that how this affects the great debate community is, I think it has a negative effect. I think it has an adverse effect in the sense that we have to actually sit down and debate these terms rather than use the ontological, rather than making an affirmation about a proposition. We have to sit down and hash out what we mean by this. I'm an atheist, and by that I mean this. And if that is compatible with theism or specifically Christianity, I don't see how that's productive. Or, I mean, you're saying you're not answering the proposition, but I still don't see how it's productive or coherent.
Again, it doesn't have to be. Like, no one's opinion matters. This is my position. I get to define it however I want. No one gets an opinion on it. No one else gets a thought. It makes no difference what anyone else thinks. I can just pick. It doesn't have to be. It's not even the same with the word atheism. You can just pick this for any word. I mean, if you define this word to mean this, and anyone else says you're wrong, then they're strawmanning your position, no matter what.
Okay, I see.
It's not good or bad or right or wrong. Language is arbitrary by definition. So whether or not you agree with my definition is irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference. This is just what I mean by the term.
Well, by arbitrary, you mean that language has usages, right?
I mean arbitrary as in you can make any word mean anything you want.
Well, you could, but we do have it. But we use terms like what we're using right now to communicate in order to communicate. So if you use the term in any way you want, it wouldn't necessarily be communicating with me. I mean, a nihilist would communicate with you and say nothing in a bunch of words.
That's why if you're using a novel definition, a definition that is not the same as the consensus or the normal usage, what you have to do is you say, here, I'm using this word in a non-normal usage, and here's the way I'm using it. At the beginning of the conversation, so they know at the beginning that that's not what it means. They're thinking about it. That's what I do in every conversation. I say, I'm using this word in a non-standard way at the beginning of every conversation.
I get it. I understand what you're saying. Here's my thing is, if you have philosophers on, and then you start with the non-philosophical definition, and I'm fine with that if you want to do that. But here's what I would say is if you want to start with the philosopher and say, but I'm not using the philosophical definitions, and what you just said was, I get to define it however I want, and then you have to go by what I define it as. I would just point out that that's the same way with your morality model. Is in your debates, people say, well, what do you mean by morality? And you say, well, what I mean by morality is the best possible world, or something like this, or non-imposition on will, something like this. And like I say, when you use your own personal definitions in a debate like that, it there's a lot of room for equivocation, of course. But if somebody knows what you're saying up front, I don't think it's the same debate as the rest of the great debate community's having on morality, or atheism. Do you get what I mean by that?
I don't care about the great debate community. They're pretty much insignificant for the most part. I'm only interested in conversations with actual philosophers and professors, and they don't have a problem with my definition. I just say, here's the definition I'm using, and they say, okay. Or some of them say, well, I like this definition better. This is the one philosophers use. And then I say, I don't use that. And then they say, okay. Like, philosophers don't have an issue understanding the lack-theist definition. It's pretty much the majority definition of most atheists. So philosophers have no issue.
Do you have any studies for that?
That most philosophers understand what...
No. Do you have a citation that it's pretty... Do you have a citation that it's pretty much the majority position among atheists?
Popular atheists, yeah, like Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens,
right.
Richard Dawkins, all the people who follow them. The majority of popular atheists use the lack-theist definition.
I agree.
The majority of the American atheists, the American humanists, all of those associations use the same definition. So if we're just going based off of...
I would stop at the popular atheist. Paul Draper has a section in this article in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy that talks just about new atheism, and he mentions all the four horsemen by name, and he says like all their positions are nothing new. Like you could read it yourself, but it's just I don't think you could say that it's the majority position among atheists. Now that may be true, but I would just like a citation for it though, if that were the case.
I could probably find one, but it's so obvious I just don't even look for one, because if you look at all of the big atheist organizations that have the most members, they all use that definition. If you look at all the big YouTube channels, they all use that definition. If you look at all of the people in like conferences, they all use that definition. So I don't think so. But
I think the philosophy community of atheists all don't use that term.
All right, I totally agree. The philosophy community, which is an extremely small minority of atheists who know.
Yeah, but you appeal to philosophers when we're talking about philosophy. A lot of times in your debate, you go, well, 70% of philosophers are atheists, and 50% of those are naturalists, and you give all these terms about philosophers, where your opponent can just go, it doesn't matter. I'm talking about popular people. I'm talking about ad populum.
So an argument from authority is when you use an authority in the field who is actually an authority in that field. So if I'm talking
Sure.
about, like, does philosophy as a field indicate a God? And I say most philosophers are atheists, that's a reasonable argument. But if I said the definition of atheism I use, the number of philosophers who use a different definition are irrelevant because they're not authorities on the definition I use. I am the only authority on the definition I use.
Right,
So
but what?
appealing to
Go ahead.
authorities is totally fine if you leverage the field that they're an authority in. But I'm not talking about the field they're an authority in. I'm talking about the field I'm of authority in, which is my position. So the only authority who gets to define my position is me. So no amount of philosophers ever get any say on that at all.
Okay,
So
but
you
what?
can-
Okay, so only I understand. Like you're like, hey, I'm just going to hold to my position. This is my position. I don't care what philosophers or anybody else have to say. But this is what I would say about that is, at this point, all I can do is try to hold you to consistency because, you know, I can remember a time where you were debating, and I mentioned this before that about moral progress, and somebody says, "Well, why is that moral progress?" And then you said, "Well, that's just the way the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy defines it."
Because you said that before. I wanted to pick up on that. So when I'm talking about morality, I'm arguing morality is objective, which means there's a standard independent of human minds. When I'm talking about definitions, I say they're arbitrary, which means by definition, they're just made up by human minds. Anybody can pick whatever definition they want. So I'm not claiming that the definition of atheism has an objectively correct definition, but I am claiming that morality has an objectively correct definition. That's the difference between the two. So if I
it just seems arbitrary to pick and choose which definition, just to pick and choose like what you want. Okay,
yes,
so
exactly.
you admit it's arbitrary.
Remember,
okay.
The natural ambiguity of language is arbitrary. You can make any word mean anything you want it to mean. Language is arbitrary.
No, it's arbitrary in the sense that you can make it mean whatever you want to mean, but in communication, language isn't arbitrary. It's
still arbitrary.
No, I don't believe so. Like, for example, I hear a lot of atheists go, words don't have meanings, they have usages, but usages of words have meaning. Because if not, how could we communicate?
So there's this problem in the field of linguistics. I'm going to appeal to the philosophers now. That's called the natural ambiguity of language. Just by definition, language is arbitrary. There isn't any kind of hard, concrete, correct definition.
I'm not disagreeing with that. These two aren't mutually exclusive of my claim. It's not mutually exclusive of my claim that usages of words have meaning.
Okay, so again, language is arbitrary. I grant that is true. So you can pick whatever definition you want. Morality, I argue, is not. Morality, I think, is not arbitrary. It is objective. There's some external referent independent of humans. So that's
but here's the thing. You mentioned morality, and you said that it is objective. It is not. You can't just pick your definition. But that's exactly what you do, because you define morality as imposition of the will. And
So I think, to use an analogy, I think morality is like a particle that exists in the world. It is a thing that exists independent of minds, and that particle makes us feel intuition, essentially. And so the morality is objective. It exists independent.
Wait. Can you start over and say that again?
So I think morality is objective, and the best way I have to explain this is to say.
And by objective, you mean that it's independent of human thought or interest
and opinion. Yes.
Opinion. Yeah.
So
go on.
Like if it was a particle that existed in the universe.
Okay, go on.
Atoms are objective. You don't get an opinion on atoms. Atoms exist. What you think doesn't make a difference. So I think morality can exist like a particle. It exists in the universe independent of your opinion. So it is not like language. Language does not exist in the universe like a particle.
Yeah, but
but
I believe particles are made up, and by particle I mean whatever I want it to mean, an arbitrary definition. Like
but you would have to give that definition before we started the conversation to be able to be clear.
By particle, I mean triples.
Okay, great.
That's what I'm saying is it doesn't get us anywhere. Yeah, you disagree. Like
I can prove that false immediately. Every one of my conversations makes progress. Everyone with philosophers and professors, it gets us completely through the conversation just fine.
It does, but as Ben Arbor, which is going to be on, I'm going to have him on next week on my channel. He said in your debate, I believe it's him that said at the beginning, he goes, but hold on a second, that's not atheism. That's compatible with other positions. And then he said, then you said, well, let's just move past that and start with what I'm saying, and then we'll go through my view, and that way that you don't straw man my position. He says, okay, but as long as we're defining our terms not loosely, like, and we're keeping up with, he said, I'll move on. But he was hesitant, and so when you say,
well, no, that's
yeah,
exactly
philosophers get through my position every time. They
Right.
do, but it's almost every time where they go, okay, we're going to have a philosophy debate, but you don't, by atheism, you don't mean the typical definition.
Well, actually, no, that's a majority of times. I think it's only about 10 to 15% where we actually start debating the definition of atheism. Everybody else just accepts it right off the bat. They just say, yep, okay, and we move on. But just like you pointed out in the Ben Arbor example, it took about 5 seconds for us to move on. Like, yep, okay, so here's the definition, here's the philosophical definition. I choose to use this one. Okay, we're accepting that, and we're moving on. So yes, we can make progress with this definition. There's no problem here unless you're being deliberately trying to derail the conversation.
I agree. You're not. I agree that you're not purposely trying to avoid the giving your definition. I agree that you're not trying to obfuscate by using that definition.
That the example you used, where you said you could be an atheist, if you're deliberately trying to derail the conversation, you could do that regardless. You don't need to change definitions to do that. You can derail
right. But like I say, now all I can do now, since you define that, is hold you to consistency. So you said, yeah, but that's my position, and you can take up the inverse position to try and derail my position. But that's exactly what you do with naturalistic pantheism. Theists have a position. You take up a position almost the exact same as theirs, but you put the title naturalism on it, and you say it could be that, and then you basically say, no, your position can't be true because of this. And so I'm saying that's exactly what I'm doing, is I'm giving the inverse and saying I could do that too, and it gets you nowhere with your. See, you have to start with your definition.
Similar. So you're just derailing the conversation by playing with definitions. I'm actually addressing their position. They believe there is a God being that exists, which is conscious. And so I think, okay, so how do I refute this position? I accept their position. Now I say, well, can I remove one part of that being and say this is what it is? So I remove consciousness, and if this thing exists, that proves them wrong. So I accept their definition 100%. And then show it's wrong. So for you to do the same thing, you would have to accept my definition 100% and then show there's evidence of a God.
No, but what I can do is do the exact. I can accept your position that you don't believe there's any reasons for God, and then I can take an exact opposite position that I don't believe there's any reasons for not God, and then that wouldn't, like I say, that doesn't get us anywhere, because all we're doing is
just derailing the conversation, so that's irrelevant. So the reason we're not getting anywhere is because you're just wasting time. My definition actually represents something. It's meaningful. It holds a position, a positive and negative position. There is evidence or there is not evidence. It moves the conversation forward. Your position just derails it and does nothing.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does, because I think not only is it not your position that you give, it's a made up ad hoc position that, and we could probably get into that another time, but it's completely ad hoc.
Naturalistic pantheism right now?
Yes. It's like,
the reason.
So I agree, and I agree with you, and I can agree with you that terms can be misused. So, for example, you often say that naturalistic pantheism, you use Spinoza as an example because in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy it gives him as an example, but Spinoza was that he was right, but he was more of a panentheist, and Schelling pointed this out. The philosopher Schelling pointed this out, that he and this is just a side note, of course, but he believed that nature was part of God, but that God was more than nature. So what I'm saying is, I know that terms can be used to derail the conversation in that way. So I would just say that the reason for this conversation is that we have to be careful. And I hope, and by the way, I just wanted to mention this because I thought you might have took it the wrong way. By great debate community, I meant the community as a whole. I didn't mean the channel great debate community, right?
You mean just everyone who does debates? Is that what you mean by it?
Yeah, like the great debate community is a community of everybody who debates on the question of God, right? But I know it's a channel now, but it just used to be like a term. So I just wanted to clarify that because I didn't want you to take me the wrong way on that. So But yeah. So go ahead with your thoughts.
So again, my definition does not in any way derail the conversation. It specifically moves the conversation forward. And you can watch any of my debates with professors or anybody at any academic level who just
Okay. Well, let me pick up there. Okay, let me pick up there. Okay, the proposition P or not P, God or not God. Okay, now
wait, that's not what we're asking.
Yeah,
that's not the question.
Yeah, but I understand. But let me get to your example. See, people say God, and then you say no, naturalistic pantheism. So you do actually give a positive argument in that scenario, right? Okay. You give a positive alternative. What I'm saying is you're not doing that in this.
Yes,
I agree. But what I'm saying is you're not doing that in this as the proposition. That you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. My definition of atheism does not present a positive alternative.
Right. It doesn't say anything about the proposition. Right, because a Christian could be an atheist in your situation, in your definition.
Correct. So my argument for naturalistic pantheism isn't demonstrating that naturalistic pantheism exists. I'm not saying this thing exists.
I know that. It's not even your position.
Evidence works equally as well for both. Like if you say, I saw a coin being flipped, therefore it landed heads. Well, that doesn't work because it could just have landed tails. So the fact that you saw it flipped isn't evidence of heads. I'm presenting a positive alternative, which is it landed tails. Now, I could just say that's not evidence of heads, but it doesn't make as much sense to people to say that. So I give the alternative to make it easier to understand. But my position is still just not heads.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. You said in your debate with Matt Slick, and I think that you obviously did, he wasn't prepared for that debate. But I would just say that you said, if you showed some evidence, then I'd become an agnostic. Why would you become an agnostic with evidence?
Because then I wouldn't be stating that there is no evidence of a God. I'd say there is some evidence of a God, but it's not necessarily compelling evidence. And so I would be
right. But isn't agnosticism right? But isn't agnosticism compatible with the position that there is no evidence for
God? Possibly, yes. But then I would stop identifying as an atheist and I would identify as an agnostic.
Okay. So that's just a side point. It's not that interesting. But what I would say is, you do say that consensus is the highest standard in science. as well as philosophy, and you said that in your past debates. But on this question, you would rather have your own personal definition of atheism instead of going with the consensus for your personal model. Is that why?
So again, the consensus is the highest authority in science and philosophy. So if you're asking a question about science or philosophy,
the philosophical
question. Consensus.
Okay.
But if you're asking a question about a definition or your own position, you are the highest authority. There is no one higher. So the consensus in philosophy about what my position is or what my definition of atheism is irrelevant. I just get to tell you. And then that overrules all authorities on the topic, because the topic isn't science or philosophy. The topic is, what do I believe?
So, well, let me ask you this, because earlier you said that morality is different because it has an objective definition. But you said but I was about to say, because you said in your debate with Destiny that he said you're redefining morality, and you said yes, because morality doesn't have an objective definition. So
when did I say that? No, I didn't.
In your debate with Destiny.
Maybe. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I said I was trying to say that we haven't solved what objective morality is yet, and so I'm trying to present a different definition and argue this definition is the objective definition. So I wasn't saying that the morality is subjective. I was saying that we don't have an answer.
Well, I know that.
Morality yet.
I know that. I'm just wondering, because I had just listened to that debate and and just getting prepared.
So my point there was that we haven't discovered what objective morality is yet. If we already have an answer of what objective morality is, and then I came up with a different definition going against the consensus, that would be wrong of me, essentially, because the consensus is.
Well, that's.
But since we haven't discovered it yet, then there isn't a consensus on the topic, and so me presenting a new definition isn't a problem.
Okay, so with agnosticism, though, as Huxley put it, agnostic just denotes people like himself that confess hopeless ignorance concerning a variety of matters. But you wouldn't consider yourself in that category.
Well, no, again, because I'm saying there is no reason to believe in a God, and if there is no reason, you shouldn't believe in one. So I lean towards the atheism side.
But there's not. You lean toward the atheism side. Why would you lean that way, given that there's no evidence at all? Because to say that that means there is none would be an argument from ignorance, right?
Yeah. So
And
again,
then my question is, why would you lean toward atheism instead?
So my position is that it's imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. That's the default position. So are you saying anything at all? It doesn't exist until you demonstrate otherwise.
But what about there's an undiscoverable law outside that God governs or whatever?
And it doesn't exist until you demonstrate it does.
Okay, so now we have to demonstrate it. How would you demonstrate something that was supernatural in natural terms?
I wouldn't. I would say it's the default position. It just starts there. You don't have to demonstrate anything.
Okay.
So it's
I think
we
that
can imagine lots of things like unicorns and leprechauns and fairies and gods and thunderstorms and magic and miracles and supernatural and all these things. And so we know the human mind imagines and invents all kinds of imaginary things that we claim are real but aren't. So anything you assert is real, you would have to prove it's real before you even take it seriously. So it starts as not real until you show it is.
It's interesting that you brought up fairies and magic and leprechauns and all this stuff because, you know, I've said, and many Christians, this is kind of a running joke, that atheists always bring up fairies and fables and storybooks and magic and unicorns and everything first. The Christian is just arguing rationally, why does this make sense? Why doesn't that make sense? And I know not in every case. I'm sure there's going to be interactions, but I haven't mentioned anything like that. All I said was that how would you show supernaturalism in natural terms? Because I do agree that science is the study of the natural world. It cannot say anything. It can't show supernatural things. It can only show natural things. So your claim about it has not been shown, I'm asking, how would you show something supernatural in naturalistic terms?
Well, you could actually. It's definitely possible. But the point I'm making isn't that I have to. Well, I'll get into that in a second, but my argument is that everything starts as imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. So I don't have to demonstrate that.
Oh, we lost Tom. Tom, where'd you go?
Sorry about that. Yeah, Zoom is kicking me out every like 30 minutes or something. I don't know why. Can you guys hear me now? Is everything good?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm on Zoom too, I believe. So I'm not sure what happened. But go ahead, finish what you were saying. The past like 3 or 4 Zoom streams. I have no idea why it's doing that. But yeah, so my position is that everything is imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. So I don't have to demonstrate the supernatural. It's just starting as imaginary and doesn't exist until you demonstrate otherwise. But we can demonstrate the supernatural scientifically. You see that's the claim. That's what I'm saying is, I don't believe you can show supernatural, demonstrate it in natural terms.
I'm getting into right now. So if you made a testable prediction, for example, say there is a supernatural ghost named Bob, and every time I pray to Bob, he will materialize a gold brick in front of me. And I say, Bob, materialize a gold brick in front of me, and what happens? That's evidence of the supernatural, right there.
Again, I believe when you use examples like magic and ghost, it's a lot of atheists use it to trivialize
picking something that I consider supernatural. So if I pick anything that I consider supernatural,
yeah, but it makes the supernaturals the position of the person who accepts supernaturalism trivialized. It makes it seem lessened. So, but I take your point, and what I would say is that ghost. Yeah, but ghost is not a it's not a claim that you can. Okay, so there's not a claim that ghosts are things that you can test or something like that. So if we were to see, let's say, how? Because if we were to see a ghost,
you would just ghost, and there is a specific name to this gold. This ghost is Bob or whatever, and I can say this ghost exists, and we can prove it exists because every time I pray for a gold brick, it produces a gold brick, or every time I pray for it to write a message down, it'll write a message down. Or
okay, but you have to distinguish. Let's say that, as the Bible says, knock and the door shall be open. Now I know that you said that the reason why you became an atheist is because you prayed and your prayers didn't come true. But what I'm saying is that it may be the case that some supernatural is not going to just go, hey, we're gonna test for it, and if he makes it happen, then it happens. It could be the case that the supernatural is a person that goes, I'm not bending to your will. You'll humble yourself before me, and then I will demonstrate myself to you.
So if the supernatural is not testable, then we have no reason to believe it.
No, that's what I'm saying. That is your claim. Okay. Now, what I would say is that seems like a verificationist position.
Okay. Let me clarify. So, for anything that exists, anything we think exists, the supernatural, the natural, the ubernatural, the super duper natural, the undernatural, whatever.
See, I think that's trivializing the supernatural again.
No, I'm
it doesn't help your position, though.
There's other things other than the supernatural. It's not just natural and supernatural. There's a whole bunch of other alternatives. In fact, there's
what distinguishes those? What distinguishes
those? Just make up any distinction you want between them. It's arbitrary. Pick anything you want. So you can pick it, and anything you assert exists, you have to show, is this an imaginary thing or is this a real thing? Because if I'm imagining a unicorn, I don't see a unicorn in front of me. There's these two different
I understand.
thing in my head and a thing in the world. So we need some criteria to differentiate, is it imaginary or is it real? Now,
I know, but that's your claim. Why do you need that? No,
that's not a claim. That's just an absolute fact. We know that.
But I'm just asking why. Why do you need that?
Why do I need what?
Why do you need some way to distinguish between the... well, you know what? If you would, let's have this conversation on another day on my channel or yours, because we're getting off the topic. But let me just say this.
No, what do you think? How do we test for the supernatural? How we test for anything?
But
we have to show it's not imaginary.
Okay, so I'll go down this trail with.
It could just be imaginary.
That's okay. So I'll go down this road with you. But what I'm saying is that I do think it's off topic. But I agree that we both kind of went down this rabbit trail. So, but what I would say is you're setting the deck in your favor, because what you're saying is, if you can't demonstrate it to not be imaginary in natural terms, then it's not the case.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
So we need some way to differentiate
some method.
This an imaginary thing?
Right.
Any method. It could be a supernatural method, it could be a natural method, it could be God, it could be anything you want. But you need some way to show it's not imaginary. Because if you can't show it's not imaginary, well, then it could just be imaginary and not real. And it doesn't matter what this method is. You can pick any method you want if it works. I don't care if it's natural. I don't care if it's supernatural.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing is it doesn't. You're making a lot of claims. You're saying we need a way to distinguish between the. Well, let me ask you this first. What is natural? What give me a definition of nature?
I don't know. I have no idea. There's no
you don't know.
Definition. So I didn't say anything about natural. I just said there's imaginary things and there's real things. And we need somebody.
Yeah, but we're talking about the supernatural. Right.
No, real. If the supernatural exists, it's real. So there are imaginary things and there are real things.
And by real, you mean
exists
something that exists in reality.
Yeah, so that would include God. That would include the supernatural. That would include anything that exists. Magic, miracles. If it's real, it exists.
You would agree that we have to assume that things like idealism isn't true, and things like that, to even get to your position to say what is reality, what is real.
No.
Solipsism, we have to be past
all of that. Real. If the idealism is true, that's what's real. There's just two different kinds of imagination. Now we have a superficial level at our visualized imagination, and we have a deeper level of the imagination that describes reality around us. You don't have to assume that at all. So there's things that are in imagination. Like when I imagine a unicorn, I don't see a unicorn. Those are two different things. If idealism is true,
I can agree with that. I can agree with that part. And then you give an implication. Go on.
So we need to show, how do we tell the difference between these two things?
Okay.
And that's it. Just give me a method to tell the difference between these two things. Is what you're asserting the supernatural, is it one of the things in our head, or is it one of the things in the world?
And you would say that by in the world, you mean the natural world, correct?
No, absolutely not. No,
you don't?
I mean, whatever we're experiencing around us, whether it's idealistic, whether it's materialistic, whether it's dualistic, I don't care. There is some difference between our imagination and our experience.
And you distinguish that
thing, whatever that is, that's reality. That's the world. And it could be supernatural, could be idealistic. I don't care. There is some difference between these two.
At risk of staying off topic, I would just say, and your method by which to distinguish between these two is your perception.
Testable predictions. That's how I use. You can pick any method you want.
Right. Okay. So that's just an arbitrary.
If we can wrap this up, guys, and we're gonna have a big question and answer period, the super chat. So, maybe you guys can give a concluding statement, or so you guys want to do that.
Okay. So, do you want to go first, or do you want me to start?
You can go first.
Okay, all I would say that is if atheism and Christianity are compatible under that definition, I would typically not use that definition because I don't think it gets you anywhere. Secondly, all I would have to do is pick up the parallel position and just do the same thing myself. And I think it's a way to obfuscate. I don't think that's what Tom does, but I believe the reason why it's popular is because it's inclusive. So the implications of it. I believe that because it includes so many people as to grow the group. Just to give you another example of this, a lot of times when you would see polls of atheists in world atheists or something like that, and it was around 2% or something like that, it does make atheism look small, but not only small, it also makes atheists look bad because they go, belief in God is stupid, and we know through this and that, and then they say something like that. But then the implication of that is, so you're saying the majority of the world are stupid for not believing your worldview that atheism is correct, and that you're just so smart that you figured it out. And then there are other implications, like typically atheists who say there is no God or something like that, typically are Western, white, like that certain demographics, and you don't want to just be in that certain demographic. So to be inclusive and grow your group and to grow your diversity levels and things like that, you just say something like, we don't believe that there are reasons, or we don't believe there's enough evidence, or we lack a belief, something like this. But I believe it's been popularized by the new atheists and by people like Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra and people like this to specifically do exactly what I just said. It's more of a left position, although Christopher Hitchens, I would say, was kind of on the right in a lot of in a lot of his thinking. But I would just point out that I think that not only that, but that the fact that you can run the parallel argument to derail the conversation, it wouldn't even get off the ground. And if we can just choose whether atheism is this definition because it's arbitrary, language is arbitrary, it doesn't promote cohesion. There is no communication. It communicates your personal position, but it's not a position on the proposition, is there a God or is there not a God? Go ahead, Tom.
All right, so the definition of atheism is just a representation of my position. My position is there is no evidence, so it doesn't say anything about whether God exists or not. It's not meant to. And it does progress the conversation perfectly well as long as you say, this is my position. Whether or not other people agree doesn't make a difference because it's just my position. And it doesn't matter if you think there's a better definition or a different definition. It's just irrelevant. This is just what my position is. It doesn't matter why you change your definition. If you do it for like some kind of reason to gain popularity or to discredit whoever, it doesn't matter. It's still your definition. You still get to define it however you want. And it doesn't in any way derail the conversation because you can't invert it. Or you can try to invert it if you want, but it's just irrelevant because it doesn't change my position. So if you want to actually have a meaningful conversation, you have to address the person's position who you are talking to. So me changing my definition of atheism to represent my position is correct because I still address the theist definition of whatever they define theism to be. So you can't reflect that and then change your own definition to be something completely irrelevant just to derail the conversation. It doesn't do anything. Because I'm accurately representing my position and they're accurately representing their position, we have a meaningful conversation, and that's it. There's no debate here. That's just how words work. It's the natural ambiguity of language. You pick your own definition.
Very good. So we'll get into the super chats. We got quite a few. Ronald Mendonca or Mendoza. If I mispronounced that, I apologize for that. He says, in typical Trumpian style, Converse is projecting his reasons for using his definition of atheism. Con and his buddy Steve want to use their definition to gain members. So you can respond to that, Converse, if you want.
I guess he says Trumpian style because I mentioned the left, which I think it's just a facile analogy. But secondly, I guess by Steve, he's talking about Steve McRae because he agrees with me on this position. And a lot of the atheists and agnostics that follow him and or are affiliated with him agree with me on this. What was the last part of that question? It seemed like there was a third part.
It's really not a question. It's really a statement.
Yeah, I know, but go ahead.
Khan and his buddy Steve want to use their definition to gain members.
Get definition to gain members. Okay, to gain members into what? I just started a YouTube. I used to be on YouTube. I quit YouTube for years because I worked construction. I flew out to Hawaii a couple weeks ago, and whenever I got back, I started a YouTube channel, and I've got maybe 2 subscribers or 1 subscriber or something like that. So, what am I trying to gain members on? I mean, it just it doesn't make any sense. Like, if I was trying to promote my channel, I would be running ads, and I would be instead. I'm challenging Tom and Pine Creek and these other people to debate, Jim Majors, and like I say, I'm having Ben Arbor on, and I'm going to have some other guests coming in. Just, I'm not trying to promote anything. I'm just trying to logically discern the definitions so that we can use those definitions to have a productive conversation.
Very good.
The same's true of me. Like, I'm not actually trying to convert anything to TJumpism, though it's a good idea. I am now thinking about it. Try and get some converts to TJumpism. Yeah, my goal is just to promote my book. That's it. I don't care if anybody actually joins my side. That's not the point.
Yeah, like I said, I think you're willing to have conversations, man. Like I say, other people just aren't willing to do it. I don't know if you know what it is, but I do respect you for that.
So we'll get to the next one from Stupid Horror Energy. I think this one's to Tom. Since both agree on the philosophical definition of atheism, what in the hell is the point of TJump trying to use a stipulative one?
It represents my position. So the point of my definition is that it represents my position. The philosophical definition doesn't, so I don't use it.
Okay. This one's from Amir El Shafra, or Shafra, if I chop that up, sorry. If atheism is no good evidence to believe in a God, and not the belief that gods don't exist, how is atheism different from agnosticism? You both can answer that if you want.
The modern atheist position takes the position that everything is imaginary until demonstrated otherwise, so it holds no burden of proof. God just doesn't exist until you provide evidence. That's why agnostics take the position we don't know. Atheists take the position doesn't exist until you demonstrate it with evidence. So there's no evidence.
He said the modern atheist position holds thus. I would just say that there's plenty of moderns in the chat that disagree, obviously. But not only that, I would say it seems more that the postmodern definition would be that. Now, we can argue about that, but I just don't think it's it just sounded like the modern consensus definition would be this, and I would just disagree. So.
Yeah, I'm in like the new atheist. I'm trying to contrast the new definition with the philosophical one.
Yeah, when you say modern atheist, it sounds like you're saying, well, atheists nowadays, contemporary atheists believe. Yeah. But rather,
I'm just talking about the new atheist, just the new atheist.
Yeah, rather you're saying people like Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, the people that are out promoting their materials that are been popularized, they hold this position. I agree.
Very good. So this one's from Brian G. So I guess this is a statement or a point he's trying to make. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the theist is making more sense than the atheist. This is why we need to rely on good arguments and sound logic instead of this stupid lack theism ridiculousness. Oh,
Tom, coming at you.
Sounds like a Steve McRae fan. Probably not worth my time because he's not very smart.
Oh, that's an ad hominem. You got to answer the question.
It wasn't a question. It was just a statement, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he had something at the end there.
So this one's from Sigi Fredo Sarabia. So I guess this is a question. I bet he doesn't really address who he's writing it to, so maybe both of you. Does an argument versus naturalism of the gaps presuppose nature came first if science is new? Wouldn't it make sense Newton was more philosopher looking for law in nature because he believed in a lawgiver?
Okay, I missed that. If you could reread it, or Tom, you could tell me what he was trying to say, because I missed most of that.
I'll read one more time. So
did he say noon?
Newton.
Go ahead.
So,
Okay, Newton, go ahead.
does an
Newton.
argument versus naturalism of the gaps presuppose nature came first? If sciences is new, wouldn't it make more sense Newton was more of a philosopher looking for laws of nature because he believed in the lawgiver? So, I mean, you can address that. So,
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, there's no such thing as science of the gaps or naturalism of the gaps. There's just induction. So it's just saying, like supernaturalism or God of the gaps is saying we see white goose, white goose, white goose, white goose. The next goose, well, it could be black because it's something different. That's a black goose of the gaps. If you just say the next one's going to be a white goose, that's not a white goose of the gaps. That's just induction. So the fact that we have natural explanations of everything, natural, assuming the next unknown is going to be natural, isn't the naturalism of the gaps, it's just induction. When he brings up Newton, like Newton's motivations of why he thought the universe was orderly is irrelevant. That's a genetic fallacy, I think, where you're appealing to his motivations for why he came to the conclusions that has nothing to do with whether or not they're true. So I don't know why that's relevant, and I don't understand his question in general. It's like too much stuff there to try and
right, yeah.
So let me just say this. I don't think he meant what you took him to mean. Okay, so let me just point. Sigifredo Sarabia, man, what's going on? This guy's always on the streams. He's always on the streams, right? So, no, he was pointing out what Alfred North Whitehead and others pointed out, that humans looked for law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver, so they expected law in nature, and it is contrasted in other philosophy this way. If this is a completely naturalistic universe, there is no God and no believers ever existed, they never had religion or anything, it seems that you would just assume it's just a completely random universe. Tomorrow, the law of induction could fail, and you referred to the uniformity of nature. I don't think that addressed the question, but rather what he's saying is, if I'm an atheist and I'm walking around, I've never heard of God or anything, I don't go, well, I bet you everything's orderly. Let me look for mathematical equations that will describe the so-called laws of nature, that describes the moving of bodies and things like this. Instead, it's like, I believe it was Galileo that said, I'm thinking God's thoughts after him. Because they believed in a lawgiver, they believed that there would be laws that would be described and would be ordered and follow an orderly pattern. That's why they search for the scientific method. So a lot of atheists will say, look at the Enlightenment gave us science. But instead, what pretty much all of those people back then were theists. The only thing you could point out is that they were just trying to go against the Catholic Church, not Christianity or God.
So that's the second part of my answer covered that, is that the motivations for why you learn something is irrelevant to if it's true or not. So that's the genetic fallacy, and it's untrue. Atheists would assume the uniformity of nature is just like everyone else, because when I drop a ball, it dropped like multiple times, it continues to drop. That's just induction. So assuming the uniformity of nature is just induction, you don't need a God for that at all.
Yeah, but like he said, why would nature be have mathematical? That's what Einstein said, and Eugene Wigner said.
That's induction. That's induction. So
okay,
we got that through induction.
Okay, so this one's for TJump. How do you not accept a position by definitions and still justify to make absolute claims that someone else is wrong when you admit you're not right? So that's from Sigifredo Sarabia.
What?
So Sigi said, TJump, how do you not accept a position by definition and still justified to make absolute claims that someone else is wrong when you admit you're not right?
So definitions are not absolute positions. They're arbitrary. You can make up whatever definition you want, which is why I can just pick a definition and say, this is my definition. So I couldn't say that about gravity. I can't just make up my own law of gravity, because it's an objective thing independent of what people think. So if I did that, I would be wrong. But since language is arbitrary, you can make up whatever definition you want. And saying you can't, and that there is an objectively correct definition, that is wrong, because language is arbitrary. And we know that for a fact. So I think that answers this question.
Gotcha. So this is for Converse from Sigifredo Sarabia again. What implications would Christianity have if it turns out gods not the triune God of Jesus, Father, and Holy Spirit. If God was one, what happens to souls?
Sorry, I was just writing that down. Well, he's first of all, he's assuming that that Trinitarianism is not monotheism. He said, "What if Trinitarianism was wrong and God was one?" Like I covered that in my debate with Jim Majors. Was it last week or the week before? On the Trinity, Jim said the same thing. Which Jim's another atheist that I think the guy's really bright and he's willing to debate. Like he's a super bright guy, but he said, Shema Israel, the Lord our God is one. And I said, yeah, theists believe that. God is one being, multiple persons. Like if I were to say, I can't believe Congress did that. Well, Congress is not just one guy named Congress. It's a title of an entity that's comprised of multiple persons. So with Christianity, first of all, he's assuming that Trinitarianism isn't monotheism. He's assuming Unitarianism. But what he asked was, remind me, is the question, what if it's not true that Trinitarianism is the case? Then what effects does it have on Christianity? Was that the question?
Let's see here.
I think what effect does it have on the soul if God isn't Trinitarian? I think that was his question.
Is that
right? What? So he said, yeah. What implications would Christianity have if it turns out God's not the triune God of Jesus, Father, and the Holy Spirit? If God was one, what happens to souls?
I don't know what he's getting at by that. I believe God is one. I believe Trinitarians believe that. But if the Trinity was not a correct doctrine, and all the church fathers, even going back to the apostles, like the ones who lived and knew the Apostle John and the early church fathers were wrong, which some of them were. But if they were all wrong and the doctrine just made its way in somehow, and all the churches just went, we'll believe it, just somebody brought it in and they just all believed it, it wouldn't change salvation. I would say that, because salvation is by faith alone in Christ, Christ's work on the cross. Like it just because that doctrine changes, it doesn't change the fact that you can be saved. But I do think there are heretical views that go against that. But if it were not true, that's what I would say.
Very good. So this is from Stupid Horror Energy. So this is, I guess, a statement or a point that this person is trying to make. Trying to understand evolution requires preference to peer-reviewed papers and technical definitions. Why isn't the same true about philosophical positions like atheism?
Evolution is objective. It's something that exists in the world. So if you want to talk about evolution, you have to use the objective definitions. Personal preferences, like your position, are not objective. They're subjective. You can pick whatever definition you want to describe it.
Well,
go ahead. I'm not going to add a whole lot of value to that. Go ahead.
Okay, this is from Amir El Shafra. If I missed that, I apologize again. So this is for TJump. Are rocks, cats, and shoes atheists?
No, because my definition is I believe there are no reasons. So you have to be able to have beliefs to believe that there are no reasons.
You want to respond to that, Converse, or you want to go to the next one?
You said are rocks and what? What was it?
Are rocks,
Shoes.
Cats, and shoes atheists?
I agree with Tom.
Okay, so this is Steve McCrae. This is for TJump. Since both agree on the philosophical definition of atheism, what in the hell is the point of TJump trying to use a stipulative one?
I don't use the philosophical definition. It's that simple. Like I can grant that that's what the philosophical definition is. I use the more modern or new atheist definitions.
I would comment on that and just say, like I've said in the debate, it's consistency. You know, if you often appeal to the philosophical definitions from, I believe it's Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I hear Tom quote from it all the time and say, that's what it says. That's why I buy into it. Like that's why the reason why I'm saying that this definition is why I'm using it. or the reason why I'm using this definition is because that's what the philosophical definition is in the book. You can look it up yourself, and if you don't believe it, you're just wrong, and all philosophers are against you. Like he often says things like that. And so I would just say that consistency. You have to, if you appeal to something, you have to be able to appeal to it even when it's like, for example, my example of Spinoza. I don't believe Spinoza was a pantheist. He may have been something like it, but he was more of a panentheist. But the book does say that he's classified under pantheism. So I have to go, in some sense, he is, because panentheism is similar. So
just to pick up on that, so my position is perfectly consistent. It's that arbitrary subjective definitions, you can pick whatever you want, but if there's an objective fact about the world, you have to go with the consensus. Your position is your arbitrary subjective definition, so you don't have to go with the consensus. So it's perfectly consistent.
If I could just say one more thing on that praise. So I had a YouTuber named Brenda that was asking me, could she come on and debate me? And I posted the video from last night. We had a little discussion, and I think it was kind of productive. And I posted it on my channel earlier. But in it, Brenda said, I said, well, do you believe that there was non-life on the early earth, and then there was life? And what was the intermediate between there, and or how did that occur? And Brenda said, life doesn't mean that. Life just means that things are carbon-based. And I said, no, that life means something like it's organic. And Brenda said, no, organic has nothing to do with life. And I looked up life, and it said having the properties of being living or of organic and something like that. But even after that, Brenda just disagreed with the definition. What I'm pointing out with that, because we had a rational conversation like Tom and I, what I'm pointing out with that is it can't get you anywhere unless you guys agree up front. Here's what the definition says. Here's the implications of that. We just have to buy into it. And I know Tom's going to disagree with that, but
no, I mean, that's life is an objective thing that exists independent of opinion. Your position isn't. So if I'm describing my position, I can make up whatever definition I want. I can't make up my own definition of life. There is an objective definition for whatever that is. So again, it's the same example. Subjective things, you can make up definitions. Objective things, you can't.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So this is from the heathen. This is for both of you guys. If a Christian can define what their interpretation of Christianity is and should be accepted, why can't an atheist define what their interpretation of atheism is?
I don't know what he's referring to, because I can define my interpretation of Christ. But if he's saying that because there are different interpretations and there are different ways to interpret Christianity, therefore he should be able to interpret the term atheism however he wants, I just disagree. Quantum physics, I don't know everything about quantum physics. I'm not, that scholarly, but what I would say is that there are at least 10 different interpretations of quantum physics, but that doesn't mean that one of them isn't correct. So when there are different interpretations of something, we don't just say, well, there's counterfeit money, so let's throw out the real money. No, we argue for the best position, and we look at what the scholars say about it. For example, they'll look at church fathers from history. They'll look at writings, manuscripts. They'll look at church traditions. So, like, if there's something discrepancy between the manuscript and what was taught in a church early on, they might look at that. So there are many things to distinguish if that's what he means by interpretation.
Very good. This is for both. From Rai Rez. Can you guys please ask both to define their terms again? TJump to define atheism and Converse to define atheism.
Tom, let's see if I can steelman your position. Tom says that I'm an atheist, and by that I mean that there are no good reasons to believe in a God. And unless you can distinguish between the imaginary and the real, what's in reality, you can't hold that position that God is real.
Yeah, close enough.
Okay. And I would just say that I would just take the philosophical definition and just say, it's a response
No,
to the proposition.
he asked you to define your definition of atheism.
Oh, okay. All that is a parallel of Tom's argument. It's like it's like I believe it was Luis Anthony that said people who say there's not objective morals, their assumptions will be less something like their assumptions will be less probable.
You just
Sure.
outline exactly what it means.
Sure. It's just the parallel of your argument. It's I don't believe there are any good reasons to believe that atheism in the philosophical definition is true.
Gotcha. So this one's from the Heathen. For use, this is for you, Converse. What is your definition of a baseball bat? Wooden or aluminum? Does it really matter, though?
A baseball bat is something that you hit a baseball with, by definition. It has the term baseball in it. It's something that you play a game called baseball with. It doesn't matter the particulars. It doesn't matter what it consists of. It matters on what its particular use is. For example, last night I spoke with Brenda, and Brenda asked about purpose, and I said, "Why don't you hammer nails with a radio?" And the answer to that question is because that's not the purpose of a radio. The purpose of a radio is not to hammer nails, so that's why we don't use it for that reason. So baseball bats are defined as being used to play the game of baseball. Has nothing to do with the properties.
Gotcha. So this is from Jungle Jargons. So this is for TJump. Since atheism has nothing to say, how is it relevant?
So it does have something to say. It says there's no reason to believe in a God. So that's the relevance, is that there's no reason to believe in a God.
I wouldn't be adding any value. We've already went over this.
Okay, so this is from Nick. This is for you, Converse. What does Converse Contender think atheist means by definition, or the definition of atheist?
We went over that. It's I accept the definition in the philosophical definition of atheism in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I believe Paul Draper wrote that. I like Paul Draper. I like a lot of atheists that take the definition, but again, that's just I think it's a claim. It's a response to the proposition: does God exist? I think it's the invert. So you have theism, and I believe, like they said in the article, that it's defined in terms of theism. So you have theism, and then you have atheism, and you have to define it. And the A has the stand for the negation, just like it says in the article.
Gotcha. So we just got a super chat in from Ask Yourself. We appreciate that.
Ask yourself.
So this is for Tom. Is involuntary imposition of will a proposition? If so, do you accept that you have a radical position on logic linguistics?
So an involuntary imposition of will is the same as A involuntarily imposes on B. That's the answer.
Gotcha. So this is from Nick, and for Converse Contender, I think we just did him. Never mind. Or did we? Yeah, did we? Okay, he's asking for the think atheist means the definition. I'm not sure what that means.
We'll move on.
Yeah. So, or ask yourself again. So this is for Tom. Does Tom think involuntary? Okay, that's the same question he just did in the super chat. Okay. So,
wait. So the answer is involuntary impositions of will is the same as A involuntarily imposes on B.
What was the last part of that question? Because you cut out phrase when you originally read the last part of that question.
Okay.
His question is involuntary imposition of will a proposition? That's the question.
Okay.
Yeah, and if so, does he understand that he holds a radical position on linguistics and logic? So
that's. I thought there was something else in there. Okay. Do you understand that you hold a radical position, Tom?
This is a specific response to the debates we were having earlier. So the correct answer is
I've seen that.
Involuntary imposition of will is the exact same and means the same thing as A involuntarily imposes on B. And if he doesn't realize that, he's got his head up his ass because he's a dumbass.
Oh. So this is from Earthman for TJump. What does TJump base his rejection of theism on? What are some alternative ideas to a creator since he rejects theism as highly unlikely? He needs to clarify his position so he can respond to that.
Right. So my position is that all the evidence and arguments that are used to indicate theism don't indicate a God any more than they indicate a non-God. An example of a non-God would be naturalistic pantheism. And so all the arguments that are used to indicate theism can work equally as well for naturalistic pantheism, which means the arguments don't indicate anything because they can work equally as well for a God as they do for a non-God.
If I could have a brief response, I disagree. Obviously, I'd like to talk with Tom about this. Number one, I think that even saying naturalistic pantheism it's not a negation of God. So you could have naturalistic pantheism as this mechanism outside of nature, and you would still ask, well, did God create that naturalistic pantheism? You say, okay, well, it existed for eternity, right? I thought that's what you were about to say,
Naturalistic
right?
pantheism is an eternal, all-powerful
Yeah, I thought that's what you were about to say.
It can't exist with God. It has to be. It's contradictory necessarily. They can't both exist.
Yeah, but you say it can't. But I would just appeal to simultaneity and just say God and naturalistic pantheism simultaneously.
Well, they can't both be all-powerful. So either one's.
If panentheism is correct, then that God is nature, but he's more than nature, then they could consist.
Right. So naturalistic pantheism is specifically not conscious. There is no consciousness, so it cannot be compatible with a God specifically, as given by the definition in Stanford.
Yeah, but that's just a claim, I would say, because, like I say, it doesn't negate God.
Yeah, it's just the definition of the term. It says there is no consciousness.
Oh, but we have to accept the definitions of the terms from of
the position presenting it, which would be me.
Okay, so I'll just leave it at that.
Very good. So this is from King Ollie. This is for Converse. Can you ask him why Converse is avoiding the debate by strawmanning the atheist position wit that some theologians say about our position? No atheist argues what he argues. Sorry, you can respond to that one.
What was the last line that I disagree?
Yeah.
Go ahead again.
He says, okay, let's try to, he's kind of garbled here, but can you ask him why Converse is avoiding the debate by strawmanning the atheist position what some theologians say about our position? No atheist argues what he argues.
I don't, you have to be more specific than that, but let me just say this. Yeah, more important than that jumbled question is, my grandma's name was Ollie, so I like that name, and it was the first skateboard trick I ever learned, so.
Very good. We just got a super chat in from Ask Yourself for $2. We appreciate that.
Wait for it.
Do you
Ask
think
yourselves on it.
This is for Converse? Do you think Tom answered my question?
I think that he gave an answer to the question. I do not think that he answered the question because there was a second part to the question. Even if Ask Yourself agrees with even if he were to concede that the answer he gave to the first part of the question was correct, the second part of the question was, do you accept that you hold a radical view in, I think he said, either logical or linguistics and philosophy, something like that. So I would just say not that part of the question he didn't.
Oh, I can answer that. The answer is no. He's just strawmanning my position because he's an idiot.
Now I think he did give an answer to the full question, whether it's
high five, dude. High five, dude. Bam. Yeah.
So a couple new super chats in here's one from Subtracted. TJ, do you consider the belief in God a delusion?
No.
I was going to say, I don't think you would, given your definition.
Very good.
Well, belief in God wouldn't be atheism. So
I go ahead.
So this is a super chat from writer John Buck. We appreciate your super chat. And also Subtracted. Does naturalistic pantheism lack the power to be conscious and thus not all powerful? So it's like to any one of you guys, either one you can address that.
I think that was to Tom from Martin.
Yeah. It doesn't require power to be consciousness. Like I could say the same thing about God. God lacks the power to do evil. And you would just say, oh, no, that's just contrary to his nature. And I could just say the same thing about pantheism. So it's not a question of power in that sense.
I would just appeal to simultaneity and just say if they exist co-equally, co-eternally, then they would. In fact, I could run. There are a ton of different arguments that I could make. I could even run a parallel Trinity argument and say, yes, the Father is the one that is what you would call God, and then the Son, which is part of God, is the natural part that became nature. And I could make a parallel argument that all you could say is, I disagree. I don't think that could work, but I think that would be more of a modalist type position, so I wouldn't hold it. But I'm just saying they can naturalistic pantheism as a emergent property of God, but simultaneous with God God could have the consciousness, and as pantheists say, nature could be part of God, but God is more than nature.
Very good. We just got a super chat in from Ask Yourself for $2. We appreciate that. For Converse, is involuntary impositions of will, is it a proposition?
Not in the way that you just posed it. Is involuntary imposition of will, did he say a proposition?
Yep.
You would have to frame it in a proposition, in a manner in which it gives a proposition. So you could say something like, morality means, or what we mean by morality is involuntary imposition of will. And in that sense, that would be a proposition, whether it's true or not. But just saying.
So if someone asked you, what is morality? And you said involuntary imposition of will, would that be a proposition?
In just the form of it, it would
well,
be
if someone asks you what is morality, and you answer involuntary imposition of will, would that be a proposition?
Oh, okay. Somebody said, I have to play this out so somebody come up and they said, what is morality? And I say, it's involuntary imposition of will. I guess
that would be the same as saying morality is involuntary imposition of will, isn't
it? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's why I put it out in a form that kind of gave it as a proposition. But in that
so
sense,
when asked me, what is morality? And I answered involuntary imposition of will. That is a proposition, and he's a dumbass. Thank you.
In the sense that I just laid out, I think it is, but he could be correct though about that it's a radical position. So I mean, but since it's your personal position, that would make sense that it's.
Well, the radical position he's saying is that I said it was a proposition, and he said it wasn't. He's saying that's a radical proposition. We weren't actually talking about whether or not it's true. That was a different part.
Very good.
But anyway, you can go to the next one.
I seen the debate. I'm gonna leave that between you guys.
So this is a new super chat from Sarah J. We appreciate your super chat. She says, "Come on, Steve McCurry. When will you be debating? You need to start walking the walk instead of talking the talk in the chat." Oh, there's just some words, fighting words.
Well, if I could just have a quick response about that. I know Tom probably doesn't want to say much about that, but it's interesting because Steve and I talked about this the other night, and we're not like somebody implied that we were like good friends when we were recruiting people or something. Like I've only spoken to Steve maybe once or twice. We've been on a stream together once, and we've maybe spoke a couple of times. So like we're not best friends or anything, like that. So but what I would say that's interesting about this debate is typically if you watch debates, forgive me because I always say great debate community because it's an older term that just means the community of people who debate about the great question, is there God, or something like that. Typically, it's the theist is on the defensive the entire time. Like, for example, Tom's model, because he doesn't take on a burden of proof like the proposition that God doesn't exist, it's pretty much the whole time is, I don't think there's any evidence for God. And then the theist is like, no, here's evidence. And he's like, no, it's not evidence. Here's why. And not just him, though. I'd say the majority of conversations are like that. And so it reminded me when they said, why don't he start debating, is that this conversation tonight, a lot of it was Tom on the defensive saying, no, I accept my position for this reason. I go, well, no. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, if we can make these short and pithy, that'd be great. So this
Sorry,
is
it's a way.
it's all good.
Go ahead.
This is from Subtracted. I guess this would be towards you, Converse. If God is timeless, when did he get the time to exist?
I see what you did there. You know, it's not really I don't even know if that's I don't think it's a sincere question, but I mean, I could appeal to simultaneity, but also, I would just say that, I think William Lane Craig studied time for like 11 years or something like that. I would just say I'm underqualified to represent God in time.
Gotcha. So this is from our Patreon, Brian Stevens. Question: I don't believe Converse Contender can do an ally. Prove it now.
Okay,
Ally or ally? A-L-L-Y. I don't know what that means.
Oh, he's saying who said that though? Who was the
This
person?
is from Patreon, Brian Stevens.
Oh, Brian Stevens. Yeah, Brian Stevens is always in the stream as well. No, he was trying to say ollie. He don't believe I can do an ollie. I actually grew up a punk rock skateboarder.
That's O-L-L-I.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out.
Because earlier there was somebody named Ollie that asked a question. I said that's my grandma's name, and that was the first skateboard trick I learned. I actually grew up a punk rock skateboarder. I wasn't really religious. So I mean, I just came from. So I would say yes, I'm a good skateboarder. Decent,
cool.
at least.
Gotcha. So Nate Brody for Converse. Does Converse know that agnosticism has more than one meaning too? Ask him what is the philosophical definition.
Yes, I do know that agnosticism has more than one meaning. So there's ask him what's the philosophical definition there. So here's what they put in the Stanford Encyclopedia, of philosophy under it, agnosticism. It says T.H. Huxley. He has said that he originally invented the word agnostic to denote people who, like himself, confess themselves to be hopelessly ignorant concerning a variety of matters about which metaphysicians and theologians, both orthodox and heterodox dogmatists, utter with the utmost confidence. So I would just say, are dogmatized with the utmost confidence. So I would just say, yeah, there's plenty of positions. There's, we don't know. There's not a coherent question. There's a ton of views. So yes, I know that.
Gotcha. So this is from Mitchell for TJump. Does your awesome chair lack a belief in its manufacturer? LOL. Oh.
No, the chair is conscious and eternal and uncreated.
Okay.
And I've got a chair almost just like that's a lazy boy too. I might sit in it next time we have a conversation.
So
my chair will beat up your chair.
Yeah, it probably will. You use it a lot more than me.
So Brian Stevens says, quick, I retract my disbelief in Converse Contender.
Brian Stevens always in the stream.
So chaos theory. Question for TJump is: if definitions are arbitrary, then are the words to define a word arbitrary? And wouldn't that mean we'll have to get a definition for every word that Tom says?
No, all words are arbitrary, but we have agreed upon usages for most words. But if I'm defining my position, then you would have to accept my definition of that specific position. But if I'm just starting to randomly redefine any possible word, you wouldn't have to accept that. You're under no obligation to accept that, because you have equal right to define those terms in any way you want. But if I'm defining my position, then you are obligated to accept that definition, or you would necessarily be strawmanning me. So it only applies to when I'm defining my position that you're really obligated to accept my definition.
If I could just say something quick, I believe what Tom's saying is like, hey, listen, if I say that morality means an imposition on someone's will, in order to defeat that belief, you would have to adopt that view and then defeat it. I've said that many times in reference to Christianity, that a lot of times people would jump in and out of Christianity and say, why would God create this world? And then you say something like, well, he would know. And you go like, well, why would he know? You can't jump in and out. If it's an all-knowing person, you have to accept that at the beginning. It's called inter-worldview critique. So I think that's what you're implying.
Last, so this is a super chat from Nathaniel Walters. So, what are the effects of atheism? He doesn't address it to anyone. Neither one of you guys can address that.
Well, we're talking about the effects of the definition of atheism, not specifically
Right.
the effects of belief in atheism.
Right. And I would say the effects that I gave in my on my side of the argument were, I said that given that definition, the effects were that atheism as a whole gains more popularity, more membership, because it's a broader definition. And then also they are getting rid of their burden to answer the question. And I think what makes the debate community in general over these big questions exciting is that we're trying to answer questions that the human spirit or heart or nature or biochemistry, neurons, whatever, are begging us, like, what happened? And some people are saying, this natural stuff happened, duh. And then some people are saying, no. So I think that's the other implication of it, is that it doesn't give an answer to that. Rather, it says your answer is not sufficient.
Gotcha. So this is our very last question from Brother John for you, Contender. If Yahweh is spirit, Holy Spirit is spirit, and Jesus is ? Not flesh, spirit ? Three spirits?
What? I didn't get the last part of that, but if it's what I think he's implying by that, I'll try and answer it that way, because I didn't quite understand that.
Kind of ambiguous here. I'll try.
Okay, so yeah, if you want, I'll just try and answer it in the way that I understood it.
That's probably the best way to do it.
Okay, so I think what he's trying to say is, okay, if God's spirit and the Holy Spirit is spirit, Christ is flesh. Like, he's not a spirit, so how does it make sense that he's part of God? Well, I answered that in our Trinity debate. You guys can watch. You still might disagree with it because you probably don't believe, but if that's the case. But what I would say is that I quoted the Carmen Christie, Philippians chapter 2, verses 5-8, and it says that that Christ, although he existed in the very form of God, did not see the equality that he had with God something to be held on to or grasped. So he emptied himself to take on the likeness of a human or a mankind. So in that sense, I would just say the same thing as John 1:1. The Word became flesh. In the beginning, the Word was with God. The Word was God, and then the Word became flesh. So that would be my answer.
Awesome. So that'll end it. I appreciate TJump, Converse for participating. It was a great discussion. Maybe they'll have another debate, another topic or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
James will set it up. I appreciate everyone in the chat for their super chats, all your questions.
Thanks, Olive.
Olive for opening. So yeah, keep sifting out
Thanks,
the unreasonable from the reasonable. Take care, everyone.